folks. Welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Ratchet down the music. And, well, this is 3 days in a row. You're probably getting tired of me. But just happen to have a lot to say lately. Today, we're going to be delving into some uncomfortable truth for many people. So, if you don't want your fantasy bubble to be challenged, just tune out this one. If it's going to trigger you, upset you, just don't consume it. That's how we deal with stuff we can't deal with, how we should deal with it. At any rate, I'm going to title this one, Karma, an Abuser's Manual for the Why Me God set. Let's delve into it. Okay, so I think you've probably encountered others, or maybe even yourself in a mirror, at a point where you or they have kind of felt used and abused, and that they're getting all this pain and suffering that they feel in their life undeservedly. And they're looking for somebody to either take it away or to blame. Because we can't change something in our lives, or it's not easy to change it, it's much easier to find a scapegoat, somebody to blame. Folks that believe in many traditional conceptions of God find it easy to blame God. Why me, God? I did everything like you told me. I go to church every week. I pray 5 times a day. Blah, 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 blah. And this creates a sort of dysfunctional relationship with the Creator. Especially if you have the image of a Creator as an almighty, micromanaging master of the universe that happens to be your personal best friend and wants to love you to death and do everything that you want. And I'm sorry, that ain't God. That's not the perfect parent, as any of you who have grown up being enabled and encouraged in your narcissistic tendencies to become hypochondriac blamers of anybody else but yourself for your problems. Don't tell me that you aren't in some dimension of that personally. Everybody is today. It's sort of a given when you're dealing with generation after generation of cultural programming, which has become increasingly less about what is healthy for society, which is the programming that religion is generally designed to execute, and you switch over to programming that is commercial, economic, ideological, trying to achieve one's vision of perfection for all of humanity. That can be a very dark thing. That's basically what people do when they have fantasies of being God. And when they don't get those fantasies, they have their why me God moments too, and they look for somebody to blame, and the Russians blame the Americans, the Chinese blame the Americans, and the Americans blame, Joe Biden, Donald Trump. It's a dark, dark place to be when you're looking for scapegoats and not willing to accept personal responsibility. Okay, so this is why I call this an abuser's manual. Because I'm telling you, if you are human, and if you're watching this program, you're probably at least pretending to be incarnated in a human form. If you're on this planet, or in this dimension, in this physical reality, you're an abuser of karma. That's how we learn. Karma is put there as a training system. It has evolved through co-creation, looking at all the little blind spots that all the little souls and big souls have had, and finding ways to correct, or at least isolate, those dark behaviors from other souls. It's not an easy deal. Correcting an infant is relatively easy. If you know what you're doing, it's easy to control and manipulate a child. However, there's a dark side to that, right? And everybody has seen children that were controlled and manipulated in a way that turned them into dysfunctional adults. Now, one can blame the parents, and to a certain extent that is truth. But I can show you children who had the same dysfunctional parental environment, friend environment, school environment, etc., 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 church environment, who turned out just fine and rose above what was going on, what was trying to control and manipulate them into dark places. This is what karma is all about. It's choices. You're going to have bad experiences, guaranteed. That's why we incarnate in all three realms. You're going to have bad physical experiences in physical incarnation. You're going to be hungry. You're going to be thirsty. You're going to be burnt. You're going to be slugged. You're going to break a leg. You're going to have your life savings lost in an economic downturn. Many of you are going to be facing that very soon. So get ready. It's what we do with those things that is important, because the soul is immortal. One individual incarnation, although it may seem the most important thing in the world, the most real thing in the world, at the moment, is just one play of a game that was designed to help you learn how to be a better game player as a soul. And the old saying, it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game, is really very, very true of karma. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to attract karma, both good and bad, in every incarnation, no matter what level you're at. Even if you're God himself come down to human form, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to do things you wish it hadn't done. You're going to make choices you wish you hadn't done. And you're going to learn from that. You're going to learn, if nothing else, humility. You're going to learn that you're not perfect. As close as you think you are, as much as you want to pat yourself on the back and virtue signal your perfection to the world, look at me, I'm perfect, I'm perfect. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to do stupid things. And to the extent that you try to hide those things, sublimate them, put them in your subconscious, not deal with them consciously, that is how you deal with karma unhealthily. This is how you abuse the system. There are two main forms of abuse. One is spiritual defeatism, I've called it recently in some writing. This is where you get to the point where, you know what, I can never do things right, so fuck the world. I'll just do what I want. And they can deal with the consequences. Because I'm through living in everybody else's universe. I'm going to just do what I want and be what I am and blah, blah, blah. And this is an attitude that some people approach very belligerently like that, but it's very much like the attitude of the folks that who embrace the law of attraction idea. And, oh, well, I know that my things that I want are all for the greater good, and therefore I don't have to feel bad about attracting everything I want to me and telling everybody else they can do the same thing and making money from spouting lies, telling people a bunch of hooey that might work for a little bit but is going to set them up for a big disappointment. And this is the problem with false religions. They may be useful crutches for a while, but if you're telling folks that everything's going to be all right if you just worship like me, if you just follow my special health regimen, if you just meditate so many hours a day and do exactly what Guru Bambanji tells you, everything will be wonderful. Doesn't work that way. And the worst abusers are the ones who think that they found the magic sauce and are trying to spread it liberally all around them for fun or profit or influence. And yes, most of them think they're doing good. Even ones that are really far off the rails, like Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, Biden on a good day when he can think straight, Trump thinks he's doing good, being himself. It's more honest than a lot of the others who put on false facades, pretend to be something they're not, like some of our wonderful other politicians, the Clintons, the Bushes, the Obamas. These kind of fakers are really dangerous. More dangerous than, an orange-haired buffoon like Trump. Humility, honesty, the willingness to be yourself, no matter where it gets you, is accepting and integrating karma. Think about it. Donald Trump was raised as part of this elite bunch. His dad handed him a real estate empire in New York, and he parlayed that empire into a gambling real estate empire. Global. And was very successful at it. Well, reasonably successful. I don't know. He declared bankruptcy, I think, several times in the process. So maybe he wasn't so good at it. Some people have calculated that if he just invested what he got from his dad in index funds, he would be richer than he is today. I don't know if that's true, but it could be. Luckily, in the process of becoming who Donald Trump is, his desires, his ambitions, his faults and failings, he gained enough notoriety to think that he could run for president, and happened to have gotten a good taste of dealing with China through trying to open casinos and build hotels in Macau, which, if you're not familiar with that city, it's a city in China that was originally given to the Portuguese as a colony, kind of like Hong Kong was. But it was returned to China. I don't know when exactly, but it sort of became a very different place. Kind of a separate set of rules, and that's why Macau is the gambling capital of China, where gambling is technically illegal, but people do it all the time on mahjong, on all sorts of things, all sorts of... if you ever get a chance to play Chinese poker, don't do it for money. Let me tell you. They make up the rules as they go, I swear. At any rate, Trump is not a perfect person by any stretch of the imagination, but he has integrated who he is with what I think he sees as a higher mission. Now, you can argue all you want about whether his higher mission is working or not. He did some bad things. He used the mother of all bombs during his 4 years, or at least okayed it in Syria. He was the first president since, I don't know, since forever memory that really took any serious action to stop what everybody knew was going on with China. The subversion, the theft of intellectual property, the genocide, slave labor going on within China that companies have been profiteering from. Looking the other way because it allowed me to be more competitive. You know what? We could have stayed competitive by just saying, you know what, we're not going to play this game of letting you manipulate your currency so your goods are cheap and they can drive our own companies out of business. That game happened many, many times in the last 100 years, or at least since World War II, to an America that used to be a pretty damn good place that took care of its own people. And this is how karma gets abused at a larger scale. Karma affects organizations. It affects countries. It affects parties. It affects religions. And to the extent that they don't deal constructively with their mistakes, their shortcomings, those will come back to haunt them. Good example is the very beginning of the United States, when the Declaration of Independence was signed, when the Continental Congress was formed to come up with a constitution for those states. Many of the founders thought slavery was a bad thing and wanted to follow suit with some of the more progressive European countries of the time and say, let's make this illegal. Nobody should own somebody else. Well, there's a story behind that, because the countries that had made slavery illegal did it because it was less useful than wage slavery. It's true. Old school slavery, when you actually owned another person, you had responsibility for them. You had to take care of their health. You had to provide a place for them to live. You had to basically be their entire government. That was expensive, more expensive than hiring somebody off the street, giving him a few bob to work 12 hours a day in your factory, and then kicking him out on the street again. And that's exactly what was going on in England at the time of the American Revolution. That's why so many people wanted to come to the New World. They didn't want to come here to go abuse and and terrorize Native Americans, contrary to popular belief. They came here to avoid exactly that. And for the most part, the people that were here at the time got along pretty well with the people that were coming. It wasn't until governments back in Europe and government wannabes here started organizing to control and twist things in their direction that all of a sudden we had a lot of conflict. We had exterminations on both sides. Now, they don't like to mention it anymore, but in fact, Native Americans massacred, killed women, men, children, scalped them, desecrated their bodies in ways that they knew would be most terrorizing to other settlers. Yes, this did happen. You can't deny that. Anyone who thinks that the Native Americans were these wonderful, pristine, godlike nature lovers who never did any harm in their lives, you're fucking crazy. And you are committing a karmic sin by doing that, by ignoring truth, spinning truth to suit you. This is a sin. This is karmic sin. It's an attempt to tyrannize others by promoting lies. Tyranny is the karmic sin. And I guarantee, no matter which party you're part of, no matter what religion you're part of, no matter what country you live in, no matter what your political ideology is, you are an abuser of karma. In at least some small way. Admit it, acknowledge it, and deal with it. Don't pretend it doesn't exist. This is spiritual bypassing, the other wrong path you can take. You're not going to learn anything spiritually by pretending something doesn't exist. By pretending, oh, it's all an illusion. The Matrix made me do it. Spiritual bypassing, scapegoating. That's not healthy. It's not going to help you. It's an abuse of karma because it's allowing you to avoid facing how you and your personal reactions to the situations you've been in have guided your behavior, your choices, consciously or unconsciously. The things we do unconsciously can generate even more karma than what we do consciously. So don't think you can escape it by just turning over everything to Jesus. Jesus runs my life. Sorry, that's spiritual bypassing too. You can't avoid it by meditating your way to nirvana. That's spiritual bypassing. Spiritual defeatism, spiritual bypassing are your two big enemies in dealing with karma. Eyes wide open, not eyes wide shut. What else can we say about that? Well, let's talk about another dimension of abuse. Many adherents of different religions, anti-religions, pseudo-religions, spiritual but not religious ideologies, they have this idea that it's either this or that. That's called duality. Or they say, well, it's neither this or that, it's one. You see how stupid that is? To think that the only possible solutions are one or two? What kind of mathematics would stop at two and call your conception of the universe complete? And no, you don't just have to add 3, 6, and 9 and suddenly everything becomes perfect in a Teslerian way. It doesn't work that way. Now, some numbers are more special than others. 3 is a very important spiritual number. So is 12. So is 7. So is 5. They all have their uses in coming to a higher understanding of spirituality. But ultimately, spirituality is infinite. 12 is an important number because it defines the structure of the system of spiritual advancement that we currently live in. Is it always going to be that way? I don't know. It works pretty well. And it makes sense because if you have 3 realms of experience, physical, spiritual, and God, each of those 3 realms gets its own space and time. That's why the truth that physicists are coming to slowly is that there are actually 12 dimensions in physical reality. Now, the deeper truth is there are actually more than that, because outside of this one universe, there are many other universes. And each other universe is kind of like an extra dimension. But once you get past 12, it's kind of just like a postal code for a different neighborhood. So 13 and above are not such special numbers. There are ones up there that kind of represent clusters of universes. That's why some bigger numbers like 144,000 have some certain significance to people. Bigger numbers like the bigger binary numbers, 2048, 4096, etc., have certain significance. They maybe give some structure to different dimensions of the multiverse upon which souls organize themselves. And that's what the multiverse is all about. That's what creation is all about the organization of souls. Allowing them to develop higher consciousness at their own speed, at their own rate, in their own path, to get to the point where, well, get to the place just right. I like the song Simple Gifts. I also like its sister song, Lord of the Dance, although I don't much like the word Lord. But that's kind of the way things are. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. That's what we all want, isn't it? To be in that place where we feel perfectly at home, perfectly loved, perfectly comfortable. That place that we think of as our own private peace. Well, that's what the multiverse is all about. That's what creation is all about. Getting there is your job. Because you aren't born as a soul knowing exactly what's good for you. You aren't born knowing what you're good at, what you're going to fall flat on your face doing. You're not born knowing what your passions are going to be when you grow up. Think about it. A baby, when they're born, they're passionate about getting their next meal, whether it's from a mama's tit or from a bottle. They don't care. They want to be fed. And they want to be diaper changed if it becomes uncomfortable in their pants. And they want to be loved and cuddled close and kept warm. They don't care who does it. They don't care what their alternative motives are. And I guarantee those needs and wants are going to change as they grow up. Unless they're somehow stunted, which they can be. And sometimes by physical, mental disability, sometimes by helicopter parenting. Extreme helicopter parenting. This is why codependent relationships can be very dark, but they can also be very useful. If you find just the right codependency, you might just both get to some place that you never would have gotten to separately. So let's not knock anyone else's relationship. If you haven't lived in their shoes, if you haven't walked in their life, don't criticize. Don't tell people they're doing something wrong unless it's actually hurting somebody else. Obviously and definitely hurting. Get how this abuse stuff works? The more power you have, the more power you have to abuse karma, to force your reality on somebody else, to force your judgments, your prejudices on someone else. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't do that. We're going to do that. We need to do it consciously, with an understanding that we are not perfect. Our prejudices may be blind spots. Our judgments may be somewhat blind. That doesn't mean we don't make judgments, because that's how we learn. That's how Karma herself learned. For those of you who haven't caught other episodes where I talked about it, I'll tell you exactly who Karma is. Brief story, but just to help fill the gaps for somebody who didn't tune in till this episode and kind of wants to hear more about this karma thing. Karma was, in fact, the first child, the first unaborted child of God. She was the only child he created, or that's still extant, that still hasn't been aborted, that was created without free will. She was created as a level 0 consciousness, virtual soul, running on programming. What did God program her to do? He programmed her to watch her father and all of her siblings, observe them, and judge which behaviors, which ideas were better or worse. And to decide at some point when she felt she'd learned enough to earn free will, be like her brothers and sisters. That took a long time of observation. In fact, she didn't feel like she'd learned enough till physical creation had started. Karma was waiting and watching and not making herself manifest through much of creation. In fact, till partway through day 7 of creation, when God was already incarnating himself and letting the kids run amok. And it was then that she finally decided, you know what? I've learned enough. I've got to do something because Daddy's left me here watching this mess and I got to do something. She finally felt pressured enough to take on free will, to take some responsibility for what was going on. And so that was almost like a second birth for Karma. And she originally didn't want to take credit for anything she did. So she allowed the Hindus to think that she was a thing, an idea, a principle, instead of a goddess. That's why still the Hindus think of karma as like a law of the universe. They don't even realize that she's a goddess. Now, after a while, she saw that, whoa, I'm still learning, I'm still growing. I don't deserve to call myself karma yet. I'm going to go play the game like my brothers and sisters do, admitting that I'm a flawed god. And that's another birth that Karma had. You may know her in that birth as Athena, born from the mind of God, from the mind of Zeus, Deus Pater, playing along with her brothers and sisters as the goddess of wisdom. Wisdom, where does that come from? It sounds a lot like karma, doesn't it? Karma is what makes us wise. Wisdom doesn't just come from intelligence, doesn't just come from knowledge. It comes from knowing how to use those and make good decisions, responsible decisions that are going to play out well in the long term, i.e. karma. At some point, Karma got good enough at her job that despite the fact that she had kind of gotten very disgusted with the whole game, God decided, you know what? You've done a good enough job. And this job, by the way, was sort of being conducted in the test tube of the Gaia experiment. This planet, this species. You're chosen not because you're better than any other chosen species. In fact, you were chosen because you were dumber. You had fewer abilities. You were a better test species for a social experiment. And if you know anything about social experiments, social engineering, you know that you cannot be successful doing social engineering if the subjects know the game you're playing. They will try to game the system. This is why humanity had to forget so many times, had to be reset so many times, to the point where it didn't really believe in God anymore. It was creating its own gods, where the older children who were still operating at the God level thought, oh, Daddy's dead, let's go pretend I'm Daddy. And you got a lot of false gods, pseudo-gods, alien gods, whatever. Well, to cut to the chase, all that is behind us because the miracle has happened. God incarnated, found a way to get back to level 12 consciousness, observed what the family had done in the meantime, co-creating the laws of karma, the laws and corollaries, fixing all the bugs, finding all the corner cases that needed to be plugged, and decided, you know what, this is good enough. Good enough to let it out of the lab. And so from that point of view, karma is like a disease, a virus, if you will, that God has very carefully contrived to grow in this little petri dish we call Earth, so that it wouldn't infect the rest of the multiverse till it was ready. Now, there have been a number of ready points before. You're not the first chosen species. And there were other versions of reincarnation and karma that were decided to be good enough to go spread and gradually make more responsible gods take the irresponsible gods and make them scared of catching the latest virus. That's why you don't see aliens walking around the planet, do you? You don't see gods throwing thunderbolts around anymore, do you? Not that that didn't happen at one point. No. Not that they're not there anymore, not that they died or they're just figments of imagination, mythology. No, they're scared to come to this planet because they don't want to catch karma. But they're going to be forced to now because the experiment is over. Day 7 of creation is over, or very nearly so. Within a very short time, it will be over. And day 8 of creation will start. What's day 8 all about? Spreading this virus of karma far and wide. How? Well, kind of like a spiritual version of Star Trek, if you will. And that's one of the battles going on right now. That's why you've got people saying, oh, this galactic federation is going to save humanity from itself and is going to help us get control, and they're going to guide us and help us not to destroy ourselves. That galactic federation is made up of the folks that pushed the experiment over previous finish lines. They are previous God-level species, many of them who have forgotten so much they don't even believe in anything spiritual anymore. They're completely materialist scientists who think they know how to do everything, and because they can pretty much do almost anything with the level of powers they have, they can manipulate DNA, they can make lower consciousness souls see whatever they want them to see, think whatever they want them to think in some cases. They have a lot of powers. But they're still afraid of karma. They're afraid of this planet. They're afraid of this species. This is the game being played out right now. Many of them are coming to realize that the battle is over. The Gaia experiment is done. And what they're trying to do is contain humanity, limit humanity. They're trying to depopulate the planet. They're trying to create as much chaos and conflict as possible within our species so we won't get our act together and start working in concert with our real friends, and we do have real friends out there, to develop and perfect technologies that will allow us to be a spacefaring species and become the leaders of a real federation that's not run by communists by galactic capitalists, but is run by humble, godly creatures who want to become more like the first creator. Not be the first creator. They know they will never be God. They would like to be like God. Senior creators with their own personality, their own capabilities, their own specialties. This is the team that's going to take over humanity once all of you die. You'll go to heaven next time, and you'll have your life review. You'll see the karmic truth of your most recent incarnation, and you'll be given a range of opportunities for your next incarnation. You don't get to decide everything. I want to go be I want to go be a Hollywood celebrity and win 10 Golden Globes and 15 Oscars and that's not how it works. You get to make a lot of choices when you reincarnate, but they are a limited set of choices based upon which heaven you happen to be in, and there's not just one, which counselors are assigned to you in that heaven, and they are not perfect. They are learning karmic lessons at the spiritual level in the service of a particular God or group of gods. And you're not going to get carte blanche, and nor would anybody want to. Anybody who knows much about the soul knows that anything that comes easy is not appreciated, is not valued. If you're handed a paycheck every week for doing nothing, you become lazy, you become entitled. This is why ideas like UBI are stupid. You need to make people work for what they get. If you look at where welfare programs have been more successful, they're managed on a community basis, and everybody who gets a handout is given some kind of a job. Everybody's capable of doing something. If you're laid up in a bed, you can read stories to kids whose parents are working and who don't want to stay at home and read stories to their kids. You can go sweep up the street, do lawn work, clean up the parks, clean up the streams, clean up the rivers. Yeah, it's not glamorous work, but it's work that needs to be done. And if you're going to get a handout from the government, you damn well better be doing something for it, or you're going to be a lazy, entitled, karmically damaged person. So I would hope that, I'm getting close to finishing this one, I think. I would hope that it gives you a pause for thought, both spiritually, politically, economically, and maybe pull yourself out of whatever why me God bubble you're in. Because one of those bubbles that's most common right now is thinking of the government as God. Oh, if we just had my party in power and the other party was completely destroyed, it would be perfect. Who's your God? And what do you do when they let you down? And they will let you down because they're not God. I hope hope I stimulated some thought here. If you like this segment, like, share, subscribe. Maybe donate a few bucks to the Rob Trump Relief Fund. Otherwise, tune in for the next episode of The Ominous Hour. Till then, it's been a pleasure. Happy karma.